Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Life Force Academy. Life Force Academy, not only a great way to have a beautiful meditation practice or yoga practice from your home, no matter where you live. Not only a great way to keep your body healthy, keep the mind healthy, but perhaps to me, even more importantly, a beautiful way of staying in touch, staying connected to what really the greater energy of our lives are all about. To have practices that are powerful enough to allow us and to assist us in entering into the space of our being, of our life, of our existence, where we very genuinely and naturally feel connected to the deeper reasons why we're here and the bigger work we have to do. So to me, that's what the Life Force Academy is all about. If you have a mind, you have a mission. And from there, very genuinely, happiness emerges via our warm-heartedness, our conviction to what's important, our standing up for ourselves and for others. Life Force Academy, you can start a $14-day trial for just $1. If you go to the URL lifeforce.yoga, just type that into your browser, lifeforce.yoga, and you can start a 14-day trial for just $1. Check it out, Life Force Academy. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, everyone. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Wherever you get your podcasts, if you like what you're hearing, please leave us a rating or a review. We'd really appreciate that. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the episode. Hey, greetings, friends. This is Jai Dave. Thanks for listening today. My special guest on this episode of the podcast is my friend Vedya Amrita Bethel. And we originally met not too long ago at a conference for yoga teachers where she was speaking on diversity in the yoga community, racism in the yoga community and in the yoga industry, and helping us understand that better and educating us. And I immediately felt a great connection with this sister and have kept in touch. And we've had some great phone conversations since then, speaking on this work. And so when the events of the last several weeks have happened, with the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and that having catalyzed this just tremendous force for the movement, for the Black Lives Matter movement, and for this struggle for true autonomy and equality for Black people, people of color, indigenous peoples. I really thought Vedya Amrita would be a perfect person to have come on the podcast so we can talk about this, and specifically talk about this from the context of a beautiful Black woman's experiences as a yoga teacher, Kundalini Yoga teacher, in the yoga community, in the yoga industry, and also being a Black woman living in the United States of America in 2020, New York City, having been raised in Atlanta, Georgia. And what's that like? And how did her path lead her to where she is right now? And so we have a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. We keep it real, and she shares a lot of her experiences, her wisdom, her huge heart, and great radiance. She's a beautiful sister. I'm excited for you all to meet her. Check her website out, myglowinghouse.com, or if you just look in the podcast description, we'll make sure to link to that and to her Facebook and Instagram. And so thanks so much for listening, and enjoy this conversation with myself and Vedya Amrita Bethel. I'm real happy to be connecting with you here. Thank you, Vedya Amrita, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for for the honor and the privilege of being here. It's greatly appreciated to chat with you and spend time with you in this way, and just have a dialogue. It's super cool.
Cool. So, well, we know each other a little bit, but we don't, you know, I at some level, I feel like we know each other very deeply. But,
Yes.
But I don't know that we've met in person. Have we?
I saw you last summer at summer solstice, but it was at tantric, and you know that's a whole serious situation. So I think I saw you there, and I didn't. I was working in hospitality as a co-manager of that particular missile or job at Solstice, and so it meant that I was there all the time, and I didn't get a chance to get out and to get to a lot of classes because I really wanted to go to yours and have that face-to-face experience. Because what's very interesting is I have been attending your specialty courses that you have online, you know, for special occasions like summer solstice. And I think the first one I attended was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago around, it was like a major eclipse. Oh, it was the one, it was a moment in time where you weren't supposed to go outside because if you looked up at the sun, you could like that whole thing. And you taught a class that day for that occasion. And that was my first one with you.
The one when the president looked up at the sky?
Yes.
Yeah, that was that great, what they were calling the Great American Eclipse.
Yes, yeah. The Great American Eclipse. And so that was my first online class and meditation with you, which was so cool. And after that, I did the series that was that kind of went along as a deeper experience to that. It was great. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
So I feel like I've known you forever.
Right on. Well, we've had a couple great conversations over the last several months.
Yeah, for sure. They really do.
And starting with, well, I was in a trainer's forum for teacher trainers where you came in virtually and were educating us on what we say, diversity, inclusivity, and now we're learning, you know, even I think, or at least I can say I'm learning much more about that at this point in time. And so we had I was really inspired and not just inspired by what you were saying and the subject matter you were talking about, but I just felt, oh, this is somebody I could connect with. This is somebody that I feel a certain level of kinship with. And that was really part of the reason I initially reached out to you, and because you were speaking on something that I feel is tremendously important at that time. And now, of course, in this moment, it's front and center. And I am happy about that it is front and center. And I do want to hear, you know, I want to talk to you about some of that and what it's like, you know, being a Black yoga teacher and what it's like navigating and existing in professionally as well as a student and a teacher within the yoga community. And
yeah,
it's a big topic. I also want to hear a little bit about some of your background, but why don't we start there actually? Like, how about what comes to mind when I say that, like, what is it like to be a Black woman in the yoga yoga community, generally speaking?
Right. Well, I will tell you that before I found Kundalini Yoga, I had a friend who was a Kundalini Yoga teacher, and I didn't know much about yoga. Coming from the South in a Southern Baptist background, it was one of those things like you stay away from that. Like that's paganism or whatever, the whole thing that goes with that. And I was already exploring outside of that paradigm and was beginning to come into my own understanding of spirituality and the depths of that. And I met this young lady through a service I was getting, and she was like, "Oh, I'm a Kundalini yoga teacher," and I just heard yoga teacher, and I was like, "Girls like me don't do that."
And
like
this is
big girls.
Is this in Atlanta?
No, this was in New York.
In New
so
York.
I had moved from Atlanta to New Jersey, New York area, and I had been living there for quite a while. And so this is probably like maybe 5 or 6 years in for me, trying to navigate New York as a Southerner, first of all, and then finding a whole world of just different things that I had never really been exposed to, for health and wellness, coming to the New York area. So Kundalini Yoga was one of them. And she was on me for years to get me to try it out. And I just had this idea within myself that my body, because of the way it's designed, super curvy, not lean and skinny and white, that it wasn't for me, because that was all the imagery that we saw at that time. And at this point, it's like 2002, 2003. And so finally, she was just on me so much about it that she just took me through a couple of exercises, and ones I know now that are just basic Kundalini, spinal flex, spinal twist, a little breath work. And I just burst into tears. And I was like, oh my goodness, I had such a relief off of just those 3 exercises that I was like, I kind of want more of this. And I shared with her like what I felt like a yoga teacher was. And she was like, we're not like that. And like, just come and have the experience. And I did. And after practicing with her in smaller groups, I went to the yoga center that she was related to, which is where I teach now today in New York, Kundalini Yoga East. And I just would sit in there and just have the biggest, experiences emotionally, just releasing. And I realized like, wow, this is magic, and I wasn't coming to the classes for a very long time before I raised my hand to become a teacher.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And from that point on, I realized that it was a personal journey. And it was a journey that when I looked around, like I was the only African American in training class, only person of color. Well, maybe there was one other young lady, she was Dominican, and she's a friend of mine to this day, that we were the only 2 people of color out of maybe 25 people. But, I was used to navigating that environment because many of my hobbies, my work at the time was the type of work and the type of environments where I was used to being, the only person of color around. So I was used to navigating and managing myself in that way. Yeah.
There's a lot in there that I'd like to hear you unpack, but let's actually, for at least a little briefly, take a step back. And so you were born where?
So I was born in actually Miami, Florida.
Okay.
And then after, when I was maybe like in the 2nd grade, we moved to Atlanta. And then I was there, through college in my first job. And then that first job brought me to New York, New Jersey area. And so I've been there ever since.
And growing up, you said your family's like Baptist, Christian, Southern Baptist.
Southern Baptist Christian.
But correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong. When you say Southern Baptist Christian, are we talking? It's different if we're talking like Black Baptist Christian versus white Southern Baptist Christian.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's just, it's just a different dynamic in how people move through service, right? So maybe not so different, but I just say Southern Baptist because that's how people in the South categorize their lineage of the teachings of Christ.
I see. I'm just wanting to understand for myself, because also having grown up in the South, and what I would hear when I would hear Southern Baptist, and this is my own, partial naivety and lack of understanding, because I grew up a Jewish person in the South.
Okay.
And so when I hear Southern Baptist, I typically think, in my mind, a congregation of white folks, and that brand of Southern Baptist, and always, not always. And again, I'm speaking out of naivety, not out of my belief or out of just my perceptions, coming very limited. Not always as where I was coming from, not a welcoming environment necessarily either. And so anyhow, but then when I have been exposed to like Black Baptist church at times in my life, I got a very different experience, and maybe it is kind of what you're saying in terms of how they move through service. The service itself seemed to be very different. I don't know about the ideology, and I don't know, but so, and partly why I'm going into this is I'm curious, like, what was your spirituality like as a young person, and what was your experience of that?
I was always very deeply spiritual. I was at church almost every day of the week except for Monday. And it was because I wanted to be there. I love the frequency. I love the vibration. I love the idea of God and having that relationship. And I sang in the gospel choir. I went to Bible study. But one of my things is, I would go to Bible study with my parents. I wouldn't go with my peers and they would always be so excited when I would come in to their Bible study. And they were like, "Why do you come here?" I was like, "Because I want to learn from you guys what not to do."
And that's what you told them?
I told them because how I wanted to fast track and not go through, unnecessary experiences if I didn't have to. So I want to learn from you guys. And so that's where I was as a young person and as a teenager. Not that I didn't want to expend any energy on nonsense. I was so connected to my spiritual self that it was just something that was always within me, that just that deep, profound connection with God and with my own spirituality. And after understanding Kundalini, I realized that the closer I got and the more I was developing that relationship within myself and with my own soul, as a young person, I had probably like 2 to 3 Kundalini experiences that I didn't realize was Kundalini. But in the Baptist church, it would be like receiving the Holy Ghost,
sure, yeah.
or having that fire and then passing out. I mean, there were times where I would have Kundalini rise, and because I didn't know what it was, like it'd shoot out of me and shoot me out my shoes, and then I'd pass out.
What, this was like during church service?
This would like be during like a concert, like singing. Because I really, in singing in the choir, I really felt that connection, just like when we chant and we feel that energy. It was the same sort of thing, but it was more like from the perspective of not being controlled,
Yes.
or managed or facilitated.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful.
It really, really was.
Mm-hmm.
And so that desire to learn more about my soul was always there. And then it got to the point where I started really looking at the church and realizing, I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but like that my experience of spirit was bigger than what the church could give me.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started searching outside of there and connected in with a group of people who were practicing meditation. And so it was my first experience in real meditation, like meditating with candles and, like meditating off the flicker of the light of a candle. And then starting to learn deeper about like herbs and just other things that help support spirit in its growth to its pathway to truth, and to living in that true, authentic, natural, sattvic way of being and of living. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel you. And I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine people understand, like when you're saying that the church, what we're talking about, and what I'm talking about when I'm saying, my experience of the
Mm-hmm.
Southern Baptist churches that I was exposed to as a young Jewish person, and then when we come and we start to have these bigger experiences, that sometimes the structure of the church or whatever the case may be in that, it's not making a statement on Christianity itself or those teachings
Absolutely
at all.
Not.
Because those teachings in and of themselves are what we're experiencing at some level, not ultimately maybe, but at some level. And that's why it's like when I'm growing up, young Jewish person,
Mm-hmm.
you don't even speak the name Jesus unless you hit your head on something, and like, you know what I'm saying? And then to like be told like by, friends of mine and their parents that because being Jewish, I got hell on the, I'm going to be burning hell unless I figure it out how to, get on board with Christ, that idea.
Exactly.
And so to go from that, and I think it's somewhat testament to the strength and also I think the goodness of yoga practice,
Mm-hmm.
to go from that to really to like truly loving Jesus and truly loving the Christ teachings, and to be able to
Mm-hmm.
get wade through some things that are actually obstructions to those teachings, to actually experience it at some level. I'm a work in progress, but at some level for what they are, is a testament to like yoga did the same thing for me, like it with Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually, that's what they're talking about.
Exactly.
Oh, that's what was going on there.
Yes.
There was no one around me at the time, God bless them all, to explain it to me in a way that I could understand it. And
exactly.
And so anyhow.
No, that's exactly it. And when I first started doing Kundalini, I would be sitting in the back of class going, "Yo, that's what that Bible verse meant." Oh, okay. And it's like, and then you start to see the gap, right? Of, okay, you're telling me what the word is in the Bible, but you're not helping me figure out how to get to it. Like you don't know that, or that's that missing piece. And what I found for me was that the yoga was, for me, Kundalini was that missing piece that allowed me to get to the root of that passage or the root of that chapter in the Bible, the root of what was really being talked about. And then I was like, so can I quote scriptures backwards and forwards? No, but I can tell you what that scripture means because of my experience with Kundalini Yoga. I can give you a perspective on how to activate that and apply it into your life every day.
Yeah, that's powerful. and practical too, by the way. And
practical.
Yeah. Well,
exactly.
I'm glad we're talking about this because I think it sets some good context into some other things that you were going before I kind of segued us a little bit, but because you would think, something so really expansive like Kundalini Yoga, and let's just all say yoga in general, but you and I are teachers and practitioners of specifically Kundalini Yoga.
Right.
Obviously, we both have some deep connection with it. It took you just like 2 exercises or something like that. Now all of a sudden, fast forward, I don't know how long, not much longer, and you're teaching. And it was similar for me, within a year of even trying it, I was teaching, not having ever taken a teacher training, just start teaching because no one else around was doing it and it wasn't available. So anyhow, you would think with something so expansive and really liberating and opening that, well, when it comes to something like racial equality and racism, and just call it what it is, and white body supremacy, you would think that would get rooted out within the cultures. One might think, one might not think, but one might think that that would be the case, but clearly it's not the case. And so just going back to something you said a moment ago, when you said, looking around, you had yourself, and I believe you said one Dominican sister, and then everyone else is white. In a group of, say, 30 people or so. And by the way, we both know that group could be much bigger and still be just 2 persons of color. It could be like 1,000 people and 2 persons of color.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
It's one of those things that I contemplate every day since becoming a teacher. And I have been trying to figure it out because many people want to say, oh, it's the economics as a barrier to entry. And while that may be an aspect of it for some, and I'm going to just be straight, it's an easy cop-out to say that, money is the issue. Right. But I think it's a couple of things. I think one is just the awareness. If I think about it for myself, just the awareness that at the time that yoga exists, that Kundalini exists. So that's one part of it. So if we talk about right now today where yoga and various forms of yoga are extremely popular right now, then it's the imagery, right? If my marketing pieces show a bunch of white people having a good time or a bunch of white people doing postures, then I'm like, yeah, I don't see myself in that. So, I'm not going to do it. That's not for me. Or, or if I see a diverse group of people, then I may go and try it. But then if I walk into the class and it's still all white people, then I'm like, wait a minute, I thought they had more diverse people participating in this. Yeah. Right. So it's like, meaning we do want to be authentic.
There was marketing had people of color, but then you arrive and it was just the marketing.
It was just the marketing because people, I think certain places feel like they have to do that in today's environment. Sure. Right.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, you don't really mean it. The other part of it, which I had expressed actually, I really started thinking about this. And when we had met and we had our conversation, one of the things that dawned on me is that because of the culture of America and because of the way that people of color have been shut out intentionally from different environments, they're not going to think, oh, this is an environment that I'm accepted in. So one of the things is you have to say, hey, we want you here. So there's this level of invitation that needs to come with engaging people of color in a yoga community. To say, hey, we've got a nice place for you here. Come and join us. And, we accept you, we'll love you. And, and it's real. It's not based on economics.
Right.
I'll tell you
or
a really
HR policies.
Exactly. And I'll tell you a really great story. And this may be getting off the I may be going off the subject a little bit.
Anywhere.
But it involves you.
Okay.
And I have a really good friend, really tight brother. He's a Kundalini teacher. He's been teaching longer than me, and he is fire. I mean, he is like one of the best yoga teachers out there, but he will not participate within the construct of our community.
3HO Kundalini Yoga community.
Yeah, KRI Kundalini community. And he will not do it.
Why is that? I think I know, but I just would like to hear.
Well, because it's not an environment that is accepting of people of color, and he does not want to tolerate it. And this gets to one point, and then I'll get to the story part of it that involves him. And the key thing that came up in conversations with various white people of color is, why am I going to spend my money with the oppressor to be oppressed in my free time?
Yeah. Well,
and that's his perspective.
Respect. There's a lot to. We'll continue with you. I don't want to keep interrupting, but so I have follow-ups on it, but we'll come to them in a minute. Yeah.
And I'm just going to make this really quick. So a couple of years ago, you came to New York and did a class, a workshop at Golden Bridge in New York. And my friend and I were supposed to go, so I was supposed to meet you for the first time there. But I ended up having a client, so I had to go to work. But he went, and he took your class, really enjoyed it. And afterwards, you came up to meet him and said, "Hi, brother, how you doing? It's nice to meet you." And you engaged him. And that probably was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And he still remembers it because you were the only one that engaged him. Even the Black people that attended that class did not engage him. And that is the invitation. Do you understand what I'm saying? That is the recognition that I see you and I want you here. And that was very, very powerful. It was authentic. It wasn't, it felt authentic to him. It wasn't, kind of conjured up because there was some objective there. No, it was straight from heart to heart. And that is the kind of invitation that people of color need to have, and to feel is authentic, to feel safe, to continue in those environments where they may be the only one, or maybe, a couple in an environment, in a sea of non-BIPOC, non-people of color environments. So I just wanted to share that with you because it's a testament to your authenticity and your love and compassion and just straight who you are.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to hear that. And I must also say that I mean, I'm probably, if I seen the brother's face, I would recognize him.
You would. And,
but I don't remember it offhand. And, but I do have to say also that, starting back with conversation, probably the first conversation, because the first time when I first was more aware of you after that trainers forum, I think that was it this past December? No, it was this past December. Yeah, it was this past December. And so then I think maybe a month or two later, we got on the phone and chatted.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me some kind of like about this, I believe, and that concept of feeling, making an inviting feeling. And I must say, I had not been thinking about that. And and also I'm glad to be more aware of the actual reality of a little bit from whatever I can understand from my perspective, what that is like for many people of color coming into a yoga class. And this whole experience of the last, especially the last month, has been just an experience of my own naivety, really. And myself, who would consider myself in these regards more, forward thinking, always been of interest to me, always been, kind of, central in my life at some level, not enough now I see, but at some level. And then my lid has been blown open in many ways, and not in all positive ways, because some of it's been, frankly, I've been really disappointed in the fragility, to use the term of Robin DiAngelo's beautiful book, the fragility of my white brothers and sisters in regards to this, and how a simple phrase, I understand, feeling, clenched up about it. That's natural, if that's for all of us, actually, in a certain way, when we're wrestling with things that are uncomfortable.
Right.
But there's a difference between feeling clenched up versus being, in a certain way, violently reactive in the other direction. And I don't mean violence with, like, physical violence, but I mean violence in terms of, mental and emotional violence in the form of defensiveness or and so forth. And so on one hand, I've been very inspired. I should say that also. I've been very inspired by this whole process, and this, what I really believe and see and experience as a love movement.
Absolutely.
People are trying to make it sound like it's a divisive movement, or they're pointing fingers at organizers of, certain organizations, and this isn't about anybody's organization. This is this is so much bigger than anyone's organization. And like, at first it was like the All Lives Matter thing. It was one way of deflection, and then and now, I've been noticing in the recent days, it's been this kind of narrative of, well, it's a Marxist. They're calling it a Marxist organization, and I know where they're taking that. I know where they're grabbing that from, but and my sense is, and it's all love. I got love for everyone in all aspects of this, even if I don't agree with them. And but I'm going to stand down when it's deflecting love and deflecting the upliftment of people, and so when they're saying that like that's some kind of really sophisticated or deep insight, I think it's so superficial and miss the whole point of what is actually happening here.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole point is being missed. And, there is this idea that, the dream world is all lives matter. The dream world is Ekonkar. The dream world is we are all one, but we're not there yet. So what's the passageway to get us there? Because we want to be in a place where everybody feels like everybody's lives matter equally. But the reality of where we're at in the country of America and also abroad, it's just different terminology, or maybe America is more abrasive and in your face with it right now. But, we're not, the reality is we're not there. And so then how do we get there? What are some things, what are the tools that we need to get us there? Okay, I had just read an article the other day with a gentleman refuting the white fragility book. And basically he's saying this is a bunch of mess to make, white people feel guilty and all of this. And it was a literal example of white fragility.
Right. Yeah. It's actually the opposite of that. It's kind of rooting out the guilt and the shame that white people already feel, but will not admit it.
Exactly. And so what's the first step is just let us all admit we have a problem, and then let us begin to work together to rectify it. Now, the interesting thing is that there are some work that we do together. There's some work where white people need to meet and do their work together, and Black people need to meet and do their work together. And I think that that's happening, and brown people meet and do their work together. And honestly, that's happening everywhere except for with my Caucasian brother and sisters. They're not getting together and owning up this fact and having the conversations within themselves and honest, deep dialogue, because it's at a point now where people of color are like, we've been working so hard. It's your turn to do your own work. We can't do it for you. It's kind of like the yoga teacher and the student, right? You give them the kriya, you give them the instructions to the exercise, but you can't do the exercise for them. They have to do it. They have to do the asana. And then they get the benefit from doing the asana, the growth, the pathway to their own personal truth.
Well, that is what is inspiring actually about this last month, is now some of us are starting to do that. Some of us, and I think that's at least certainly at this level, this is definitely the first time in my life that, I've experienced, as a white person, as a person who has a pretty good understanding of white people as a white person. And, when matters of race come up, as I mentioned before, is like, our sphincters clench. And, and so like, again, coming back, I'd like to circle back into the yoga part of this, because yoga should be good with this. And it actually could be, and ought to be an exceptional tool. I've been reading in Resmaa Menachen's book. So many of us are reading all these same books right now, My Grandmother's Hands, and how all this trauma, white people have their own trauma, Black people have their trauma, indigenous,
absolutely,
First Nations people have their trauma, and it lives in our bodies. And there's like and he's talking about the vagus nerve, and he's talking about all this stuff that we work with all the time in Kundalini Yoga, but just doing yoga practice and meditation practice without actively going after this and realizing what is there will not necessarily, maybe ultimately one day it would, but in the short term, it will not necessarily, start to deassemble the deep subconscious bigotries that we have, and I'm not talking about just saying we as like just being politely including everyone else. I'm including myself as someone who has bigotries, and and am only still just becoming aware of what they are, and that's what yoga practice is all about in the first place.
Exactly.
And yet there's, I just have to say we have a problem. And I just have to say that's been the disturbing part of this. While the majority of this last month, and I don't mean to talk too much, I want to hear you talk, but
no, please. Please talk. The
disturbing part, while the big part has been very inspiring for me the last couple of months, because this is what I believe I think it's just plainly obvious. This needs to happen. It's needed to happen for way too long, but the time is right. But the disturbing part of it to me has been so many people that were, what we ever want to say, they lean left, or they're kind of like mystical type people, or they, and some of them, we might call them yogis, whatever it is. I'm still kind of like trying to figure out like what this is and why this is isn't just like clear and simple. There is. Anyways, I've been very aggravated by it, honestly.
I have been aggravated by it for the last
Yeah, right.
Since I started the organization.
Right.
And I don't mean that in any kind of like,
No, I'm with you.
welcome aboard.
No.
But this has been my thing, like, because when I came to yoga, I thought, whoa, these are going to be, I'm going to say it right out, these are going to be some different white people.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're going to be conscious and they're going to be inclusive and, equal, and we all are one. And then you get into a scenario where you're hearing these, what we call microaggressions, these, like, I like to call it slick talk, like these little slick phrases that you're like, wait a minute, did that person really just say that to me?
Could you give an example of what like a microaggression like that?
So let me just think of one. So this was kind of like an interesting one. I had, there was a scenario in which a friend of mine, her husband died, and a bunch of us yogis went to the memorial, right? So we are sitting on the floor and we are chanting. And in this group of people who were at this event, they were very diverse. They were diverse in culture. They were diverse in spirituality. They were, it was like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. So we got to one point where we chanted Japji, and then it kind of opened up. And then somebody sung a Sufi song, and then somebody sung a Muslim song, and then somebody else sung a Christian song. And it just kind of like, people were just popping up singing all these different things. And so someone was across from me, and they said to me, "Oh, sing one of those Negro spirituals." And I had two Caucasian friends that were sitting next to me, and they looked at me and they were like, "Did they just say that to you?" I was like, "Yeah." So now I've got to come up with some eloquent way to, like, not make her feel bad for asking me that.
Right.
And also to not feel insulted in that same moment. But boy, when I got in the car and I left there, I was like, can you believe that crap? Like, why would you say that to me? Like, who does that? And that's like a really overt one. But
clearly not to that person, obviously, because it's probably not meaning to be malicious.
No, not at all. It was sweet. It was like, I love your voice. I want you to sing.
Right.
It was coming out of love, but in the psyche, to not know that is something you don't ask a person of color. Because what does a Negro spiritual come from? It comes from slavery.
Yeah.
So, you want me to sing a slave song?
Yeah, right.
Really? So, so that's one. The other ones are a little bit more subtle. And what's really interesting is that you, as a person of color, are faced with microaggressions so much that you don't even record them. Right. to be able to tell a story about them, which I probably need to just kind of have some in my hip pocket ready to go, because there's just so many of them, like, oh, you're the color of your skin against white, you should wear more white. When we're at an event where you wear all white, you know what I mean? It's right. Just, would you say that to anybody else? Like,
yeah, I had read a pretty good. Someone messaged me a post. I was just looking for it, but I can't find it at the moment. But it was from a black brother who was a yogi and a yoga teacher, and not in Kundalini Yoga, in the yoga world. And it was just it was very illuminating. It was everything from just very subtle things. From he's coming in with equipment, yoga equipment, but a yoga mat, clearly not a first time yoga practitioner based on, many things that should be apparent. but clearly not apparent to a lot of us, and just due to the fact that having a Black person in the yoga studio is unfortunately very rare in most yoga studios, and that just the subtle treatment and how you're talked to and spoken to, I guess it's just very apparent to you, but not necessarily apparent to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I've gone to, when I first became a teacher, one of the things I was told was, well, before you can teach here, you need to go out in the world and teach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I got a job at a gym. And when people saw that it was me, and it wasn't necessarily the turban, because I was kind of subbing for a turbaned person that was Caucasian.
I see.
When they saw it was me, they walked out.
Right.
And like, how are you supposed to take that? Because the only thing different from the person who sat here before and me, okay, maybe you think, okay, maybe it's because I'm new, relatively new to you, and it wasn't the teacher you wanted. That's okay. But it felt different. It felt different. And there's these very subtle cues that white people don't even know that they do, that a Black person knows when you've lost them, right? When it turns on to, I don't want to deal with this person because they're Black. It's so very subtle. It's in the eyes. It's in the body language. It's very, very subtle. And it's almost, I really think that, which goes into the idea of, working with the mind and working with the psyche and working with the frontal lobe and the personality. And when you, just kind of take all that in, why would you want to be in that environment? It's you're dealing with it so much every single day. The moment you walk out the door, in your free time, do you want to fight with that?
I see.
You don't.
Yeah. Well, and I can, sense even within myself, I can, and then I can sense how, many of us will respond to these ideas as there's an uncomfortableness to hearing it. And often it's the case that our reaction to feeling uncomfortable about that leads, of course, to a working to justify it somehow, contextualizing it in a way that helps us to justify it, or, well, maybe that's not the case, and maybe it's not the case. You can, that's okay, fine. Maybe it's not the case, but also maybe it is.
Right.
And that's how we treat our minds in meditation and yoga practice anyways, is not taking anything at, necessarily just because someone said it, that's the case. But also, if you're going to do that, you also have to do it in the other direction. Maybe it is the case.
Absolutely.
And then I think if we were to honestly explore this, as a community,
right,
we would find that, more times than not, it is the case. And it doesn't take much, it doesn't take opening our eyes very much to see, that there's something there. And that's and how could there not be? How could there not be, considering the history of our people, of the American story? How could there not be? There's no possible way. It's physics. There's no possible way that we could have the history that we have, and that even, it doesn't matter if it's a yoga community or the bank you work at. There's no way that there wouldn't be this this kind of, bigotry built into the infrastructure of it.
Exactly.
And it's not pointing fingers at people like, look how bad of a person you are. Look how bad of a person you are. And that's, I think, how it feels to us sometimes. And that's not what's happening. Nobody's pointing fingers in that way.
Right. And I think that, that goes to the guilt thing. And now what you're seeing with, our white brothers and sisters is that they're feeling like you're pointing the finger at me and I'm a bad person and I'm a racist and I'm all of this and don't call me that, I don't think. And so then it starts as this whole game of deflection. And it gives them excuse not to sit with it and just to question themselves. But then the other thing is, well, what do I use to question myself? What tools can I have? And I want to go back to something that you said earlier, which was about the yoga, that the yoga, you would think that by doing the yoga and especially Kundalini, that this wouldn't exist because of just all of the dynamics that these teachings give us to work on those things. But when you realize that the other part of it is reading the books like My Grandmother's Hands or Right for Fragility, like you've got to do another kind of work to supplement the yoga, the tools of yogic philosophy and even Kundalini. And when you put those two together, then you make that big stride of working on yourself and of rooting that deep-seated, thought forms that have been instilled into the psyche, into the root of yourself. You start to be able to dig those weeds out,
Yeah.
and create a new framework and a new perspective that brings you to that oneness. And that's the piece that I think is missing in the Kundalini yoga community, but in yoga communities altogether, or any place that is working with tools that helps you to develop and refine yourself.
I agree 100%. And not only stopping there, there's this what I believe is a mistaken idea that you just do the practice and all these things will just fall away. And let's use a different context. Let's say that, I'm doing all this practice and I'm applying it to certain aspects of my life, but that doesn't mean that every time my wife says such and such in this particular way, that for her, it may just be, something in that she's just trying to express herself and share something with me that's important to her. But then every time I do it, she does that in that way, I react and I get defensive. And that could go on, speaking from personal experience, for years and years and years, and been doing lots of meditation and lots of yoga practice every single day. And yet that pattern will have never changed unless I put my consciousness on that pattern itself and actively make it change. And that there are certain things, definitely, just doing yoga practice, just doing meditation, there are certain things that are just going to dissipate. Beautiful, wonderful.
Right.
And there's other things that are not. Like the Buddhists say is that samsara will not just go away on its own. You have to actively get rid of it. And that's what, to me, the Black Lives Matter movement is all about. It's actively, it's taking our collective concentration in this moment in time.
Exactly.
It's like when me growing up and you talk about the Holocaust and someone else says, well, everyone has their form of, everyone has their, horrible things that have happened in their history. Nobody feels good. That doesn't feel good if you're speaking about the Holocaust and you say, well, everybody has, and it may be even attempt to empathize, but it's actually a twisted type of thing that I can't actually handle talking about the Holocaust. And so here we are, and there's a lot of muting myself. There's a lot of people that just cannot bring themselves to talking about what's happening in a way that would help us help us all. Like this is for white people's benefit as much as it is black people's benefit and all people's benefit. And I'm involved in this movement in whatever way I can be.
Right.
Also because I am benefiting from it. It is helping me to get rid of things that are obstructing my blissfulness, that are obstructing my heart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the one thing that, we also need to remember is that liberation is dependent upon all of us. And I think we talked about this in our last conversation, that if I am suffering, how can you reach liberation? If you are suffering, how can I reach liberation? I can only reach liberation if you're liberated. Does that make sense?
It does.
And that we are all in this connection, in this puzzle piece together. And we cannot be a completed puzzle if your piece is missing. You know what I mean? Or if it's somewhere else, in the trash can, it's an incomplete puzzle. I need to find you and bring you into the puzzle and put you in so we can all be complete. And, that's what this is. And when, like, if Black people even shared, like, you are only getting a thimble through, George Floyd and through Breonna Taylor and through the different, every single day you hear another person who's been shot by the cops, another person of color shot by the cops without any provocation. And you're like, and if that breaks your heart, when you hear what has been done over all of this time, if you think about 400 years and just think about when there weren't cameras and when there wasn't freedom, and when Black people and people of color were thought of and life was executed in a way that said they were like livestock and 3/4 human and not really seen as human, you can't even imagine the level of abuse and torture that is in the lineage of someone of color. And that pain and that trauma that exists, that has been carried over. And even with all of this, I've been checking out my own reaction to certain things. I was just having a conversation with my mother the other day that that there is something that is kind of like a belief system among Black people. And I'm trying to figure out where it came from. And my mom was like, well, I never said it. And I was like, I know you don't. It's kind of like in the fiber of me that you just know you don't do certain things. You've never told me that, but it's in my frequency. It's in my DNA. It's in my thought form that was put there from my ancestors. Because there's no other way there's no reason I should in this lifetime feel this way, or have this thought about a certain behavior. So, it's so deep. It's so deep. The level of trauma, post-traumatic stress, oppression that a Black person feels, and then to continue to go through this. I think, when people say make America great again, I think the best time for Black people is like maybe like the 50s and the 70s. Because there was this degree of freedom of expression or freedom to create, and live in purpose. It wasn't really the best, but it was probably in the history of being in America,
relatively speaking,
the best time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, to even, I know, and just that statement in and of itself It's just, and again, this isn't coming from, I don't feel polarized about any of that, and
Cool.
I have, I can understand, where those folks are coming from for sure. I just know that in order for anything to work in this country, there has to be a healing process done in regards to its, first huge genocide of the indigenous First Peoples.
Yeah,
and then,
absolutely.
And the slavery of Africans. And without that, and we're yogis, and there was something you said I want to come back to in a moment, but we're yogis, and we can't see that's the case. Because I want to stay a little bit in the yogic context and world with this, because I think that's maybe something you and I can uniquely add to all the discussions that are happening on this right now. And you made the point, and what I've heard, a good bit of, largely it's on social media, it's not many people saying much. And right now we're not in person with many people because we're in a global pandemic. But you said, this idea of we're all one, and here's this picture of Nanak behind me, and we have that mantra that's at the center place of our lives as Kundalini Yogis and Ekonkar. Essentially, that's what that means at a certain level. But even to go there, not only do I feel like it's really what people call a spiritual bypass.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's incorrect. It's an incorrect understanding of the teaching in and of itself, in my perception. Okay. Because what you're talking, and there's two different primary contexts that a yogi a human being, but that's just me. I think of human beings as yogis ultimately, in the sense that we're all here discovering what we really are. Not in trying to bring everyone into our club, or it's not a special membership card you can have, but that the one context is an absolute context, ultimate, and the other is relative, and the absolute is beyond our comprehension, first of all.
Right.
And that's what people are doing, is they're using an absolute context, which is by definition beyond our comprehension from the normal, unless you're some perfected Buddha being, which we're not. Then, and nor are any of the people saying these types of things. Then our comprehension of what that even is by definition distorted. And so that's why we chant mantras and stuff, because we know we can't define Ekonkar. We know, throwing out we're all one is a cliche. And it's just a cliche. That's all it is. And yes, there's an ultimate truth to it, but the way to experience the ultimate truth is to walk on the path. And the walk on the path is to pay attention to our experience of our lives as human beings, because I got into this white body via my own karma, via my own dharma, via my own, I'm here for a reason. And so we'll throw out the other cliches, like we're spiritual beings having a human experience, but we're not really that willing to have a human experience right now when it's really uncomfortable to be in the human bodies that we're in. And what I see this movement as happening right now is one way to get us closer, as you said, to get us closer to experiencing that greater, ideal reality. But to bypass it, you're not going into we're all one. You're just you're just deflecting it, period.
Right. And I totally agree with that. And that's why oftentimes I like to use it in this context for people to realize, oh, I'm totally bypassing, I'm not dealing with it. And that's what one of the big complaints in yoga communities right now, when you're dealing with this hard, social justice issue around Black Lives Matter, is that, there's all this spiritual bypassing and people not wanting to get involved. And it's so interesting because when all of this started first breaking out with Ahmaud Arbery, and even like back last year with like Sandra Bland and, Tamir Rice, like all those folks, and yogis weren't speaking out. And people wanted to hear from yogis because they were hoping that there would be some word of instruction that would bring people together. And the idea that yogis, from my perspective, I would like to be a social justice change maker. You know what I mean? Like, we should be at the forefront of social justice as yogis because we know how to, because we have been looking at ourselves and improving and growing, we know where, things are going, with this new age and this collective consciousness. We understand that, we know that. And so we should be at the forefront of encouraging it. And we're not.
Yeah.
Because we're bypassing, because we don't want to get involved, because it's easier. One of the things I have been really enjoying is that there's something about, which I totally believe is a huge breaking open on the planet when the George Floyd incident occurred, because even Muji came out and spoke, and it was really cool listening to him, but it was almost like I can't be silent anymore, and so you had these yogis starting to come out and take a stand. And whereas before it was kind of spiritual bypassing. And I'm just feeling like we all need to be on the right side of this, and that we can't be comfortable anymore. Like, if we've had the biggest discomfort of being in our homes with COVID, okay, we know what discomfort feels like. Let's get ready and dive into it. As yogis, we practice being comfortably uncomfortable and becoming neutral to that discomfort, and finding that awareness and that passageway of growth. And we should be doing that with what's going on in the world.
Yeah. Well, it's really easy for us because we know how to, we know how to meditate. And that's a strength that we have. And we know how to bring ourselves into peace, into a peaceful state of being, even when things are difficult. That's
absolutely.
And so it is easy, it's easy to be able to, because we do know that ultimately everything is okay. We do know that. But
absolutely.
But if you stay in that space, then we miss one of the primary purposes of being here in our bodies in the first place.
Yes.
And therefore we also miss, and this is why I love the Buddhist Mahayana, Bodhisattva type teachings, because it's really all about this. It's about, it's not turning away from people's suffering, it's turning towards people's suffering, and that being the path. Whereas there is that other kind of more dualistic way approach in yogic tradition, in some yogic traditions, where you can go into this kind of nirvana type space. But from that other context, that nirvana becomes really the kind of polarity of samsara. So therefore, instead of nirvana being some kind of ultimate refuge, it's actually a temporary escape. within that
Yes.
context. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and that, I think that's insightful from the point of view of what we're experiencing right now with a lot of
Mm-hmm.
spiritually minded, well-intended, by the way, people.
Right.
These are not, generally speaking, malicious people at all.
Right.
But that's
At
not
all.
what this
No.
movement
Yeah.
is about. It's not about fighting the KKK.
Right.
It's about fighting the residue of white body supremacy and white superiority that exists within all of our subconsciouses and in the subconscious of the collective psyche.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
And so now when we can look at nirvana, then each one of us, like I've got my own little nirvana that where I can go in and I can go, and I can feel awesome. And because I'm a white person and because I have enough financial resources to live comfortably in my life, I can be comfortable, I can be like, we're all one, and I can be like that. But I have a lot of brothers and sisters and people of all in the entire gender spectrum that are not able to do that. And like these Buddhists say, what's the use of my nirvana? What's the use of my bliss if my countless mothers are suffering?
Exactly.
And so if we're really all one and intertwined, then we will be involved in this movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I was getting to with the liberation aspect, is like, if you are suffering and I'm sitting over here thinking I'm liberated, I'm not, because you're suffering. And that is my job to, if I can help eliminate your suffering, and then collectively, we reach that place together. And I agree with everything you just said. It's so beautifully said, and just has guidance in it, as far as like how we can move through and look through this. And especially with, yoga, and specifically Kundalini being the yoga of awareness, like every moment is being aware of how you impact the world and how you move through the world. And if you're moving through the world with your authenticity and with your compassion, love, support, and within your, I like to call it your mission of why you're here on the planet at this time. Like all of us have a mission. And like, how cool is it to be here right now on this planet in our bodies for this revolution, for this amazing transition into this new frequency of collective consciousness. It's just mind-blowing. And everybody, and I think one of the things too with this is that everybody has their role, and it doesn't look different. You don't have to be out in, and we even saw this, and I don't want to bring another element into it that doesn't need to, but it just describes the point of like, you have some people that, are out in the street marching and doing this and that. And you have people that are operating online and through social media. And you have other people like us having podcasts and having the conversations and getting people to start thinking about things this way. And so everybody has their contribution, and it doesn't have to be the same. Like everybody, because I know some people were feeling kind of guilty about not being in the streets, marching and, protesting. And, for some people, that's just not your vibe. That's just not your thing. But you may be really great at messaging on social media, or you may be great, chatting with your Caucasian friends and letting them ask you questions and giving them feedback to open up and crack open their minds, So everybody's operating in this time with this collective energy of revolution and transformation and social justice. They're operating in what feels good for their soul and what's authentic to them. And I think that that's something that needs to be also recognized and, and supported.
Yes. Yeah, and not all of us are going to have a dharma of our life where our primary thing is, running a social justice organization and that type of thing. But, right now, I think we're learning a lot. And we had in our virtual immersion that we had a couple of weeks ago, I had, my good friend and also astrology mentor. He's a yogi, Kriya yogi, tremendous yogic astrologer. And he made the point that like right now, like you may have your own horoscope to kind of switch the context a little bit to reinforce the point you're making. You may have, your own horoscope, but we're at such a profound transformational moment in time right now that like if we're in the United States or even just the planetary situation, but the horoscope of the United States, if you're from the United States, is overpowering your individual horoscope right now.
Yeah.
The planetary situation, and if you want to look at it from an astrological context, which is one of many ways to understand things, then it's each individual missions are being at the moment overpowered by a bigger dharmic mission that is needing all of our attention right now on the planet.
Absolutely.
And then hopefully out of this, we will take along with us in our more unique dharmas. I know my primary dharma isn't running, for instance, a social justice organization, but I do know that a big part of my primary dharma, which is much more inside of unpacking and understanding yogic practices, techniques, philosophy, all of that. There's a big arm of that does relate to social justice, and if I miss that, I'm missing a great opportunity, not only for others, but for myself. And this moment in time right now, if I were to kind of, bypass it, and all love to everyone who's doing that, it's not like not coming at you like we don't like you. It's like, this is beautiful. Get on the train. It's the Zion train, ride on it, be a part of it. It's uplifting. It's love movement. It's not some like, a lot of the real conspiracy theorists are kind of like they're merging with the alt-right right now in many ways. And it's a shame because this is a beautiful moment.
It's such a beautiful moment, and it's an inspiring moment, and you can almost feel it in every cell of your body. The activation within you.
No doubt.
It's, and it's real interesting too. Like, I don't know if you've been seeing it, but like, I've been getting like emails and text messages from people, and they'll go, "Oh, hope you're doing well in these trying times." And I'm like, I am doing well in this time of transformation and radical change. It's like, no, don't look at it with different eyes. Like, don't look at it as this like low frequency, low vibration, challenging time. It's like, no, it's inspiring. And like, this is the moment that as a yogi, I've been preparing for.
Right.
When they say, now it's like, I don't even like to use the word, okay, let's do our practice today. Cause it's like, no more practice. Like, this is game time right now. You know what I mean? Like, we are in the first quarter and game on, tip off, slapping the ball, whatever. Like, we are in game time. Like, it's no more practice anymore. It's like not even practice.
That's what I did a event a few weeks ago with Bob Thurman, great Buddhist. What I don't even know how to call him, but he's I love him, and he's incredible. And he said he said something along those lines. He said, "Enough of the practicing. Let's have some performance."
Exactly. Because we're here. And so these are just amazing times. And so I really try to even respond to people from that perspective, because like, get out of the low frequency, like, vibration of it all, like raise it, because the more we raise it in our communication and in our thoughts, we'll begin to, collectively be at a frequency that can move this in the direction in which it needs to be moved to. And it will, it will.
It's happening.
It's happening.
Yeah.
And we'll get through it. Like, it's just kind of the discomfort we have to go through right now so that we can right these wrongs. And really, it's not even really about righting wrongs, but it's about it's about getting us all collectively as, this kind of American consciousness, getting us to our truth.
Well said.
And when we get to our truth, then we can now move into that space where it's like it's all good and we're expanding and collectively we're moving along. There's this thing that where many people of color are like, if you just leave us alone, it'll be great for everybody. Just leave us alone, police. Just let us live. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for revenge or seeking it for the 400 years of trauma and death and post-traumatic stress. No. We just want to be left alone to live the best life we possibly can. Because if you don't bother us, we won't bother you. And it doesn't mean that we won't integrate. Nope, that's not what it is. It's just, we don't want to be picked on any longer. Like, leave us alone. And then we can all live together in this beautiful space of collective consciousness.
Yeah, that's powerful and simple. Simple.
And you'll hear many activists, you'll hear, interviews by, individuals, many athletes are speaking out. And what is it that they all say? We just want to be left alone to live the best life we can possibly live. We don't want to bother anybody. We don't bother anybody, but it's almost like, this constant frequency that nobody can name why it's happening. When we say, well, why do you feel like there's a need to harass a Black person and then they end up dying? What is that about? Like, can you tell us? Like, is there something we need to do different? And it's like, there's no reason, so there must be something underneath that.
This whole process takes such what it needs is a pretty high level of emotional intelligence, or at least a high level relative to where we currently are.
Absolutely.
As a society.
And it requires, like, not just a small group of people having that emotional intelligence, but it requires, a country that has that emotional intelligence and can gracefully move into it and then investigate it. And, this is one that's going to take time because people are like, well, why can't we fix it? But when it comes into the institutional part of it, and because our foundation was created with this certain frequency, it's almost like you gotta dig up. You gotta dig up the foundation and root out what doesn't work and what do you call it? I'm not good with construction. I don't know, but put a new foundation in.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think about it, it gets overwhelming when you think about the Constitution and what has been written in there when you think of freedom for all, but that didn't include, there was no thought of people of color.
Yeah.
Indigenous people. That there was no thought about their freedom. So when you have that written into the core foundation, how do you rectify that?
Right. It's overwhelming in the same way it's overwhelming when I realize, just even as an individual, as a yogi, how far I have to go. It's like, whoa. It's like when you just got started, it feels like, oh, enlightenment is right around the corner.
Yeah.
But then the more you go, the more you realize it's like, wow.
You'd be like, it's never ending.
But at the same time, the antidote to that is the joy you find is on the path.
That's right.
As much as that's a cliche, it's actually also a reality, and that the joy in this will be found in the work, in doing the work, because with every little bit of the toxic infrastructure that we move out and replace one stone or one piece with an infrastructure that can actually support true Dharma. And for all those who are the all one, idea, well, that all one needs what I see this also is, this is about laying a foundation for all human beings to be able to practice Dharma. That's ultimately how I see it. And, and, if you're living in a white body, in particularly in this country, but throughout the world, and if you have more financial resources than the average person, speaking on a global scale, and if you're a middle class American, you're in really the top elite on the global scale in terms of your financial resources, then you're, at least from that context, you have the freedom to practice a Dharma if you chose to, more so than others. And on the other hand, if you live in the highly materialistic society, as you go over to India and you'll see that while the wealth is not flowing in all directions by any means, and there's so much poverty, or not just India, but any third world, second world countries, you can find a greater joy in the people that is not flowing from that. But with all that being said, this is, I think, kind of preparing the soil for real Dharma to flourish. And so, with every little bit we do, we're going to find some level of fulfillment and joy in that. This is not like this hell process that is getting rid of the hell is what it is.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's absolutely correct. And the more we recognize that, the quicker we get to the next thing, but if we go dragging our heels, and digging in, it just takes us longer because we can't move without those people that are dragging.
Yeah. And if you choose to sit in nirvana, cool, that's all good, but also shut up. If that's, that's fine. But if you are, then, there's no need to say anything at all. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just
and
stay out of the way.
Nirvana,
yeah.
Exactly. In your nirvana, just go over there and sit and then just shower us with your goodness,
that's
while
right.
you're in nirvana.
That's right.
Just hold a space for us to get through it. That's okay too. Go to your cave and do your thing, but exactly, shut up.
Send your blessings and prayers. Yeah, please.
Yeah, because you're not helping.
That's right.
Yeah. So
we got lots of work to do. So what do you see in your horizon? I know you and I have talked, and I've we've talked about somehow working together, how we can work specifically in working on some of these issues within the yoga community and yoga industry. So what do you see on your horizon in the near future?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am, it's a real interesting thing because as an African American person, I haven't written a book my grandmother's hands, I haven't, written any profound, anything like that. But, as a person of color, you get asked to share and storytell. And so, I'm just going to keep storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
The second is that one of the things I am wanting and trying to outline and just think about is that other piece that we talked about, which is, okay, we've got the yoga and we know what those tools are, but what's that other piece that we can partner and merge with the yoga that will allow people to move through those who want to investigate their perceptions of the world through their skin color and through their oppression or through their privilege and supremacy, to have a program that they can move through to investigate that for themselves. What that looks like today, I'm not exactly sure, but I know what the end result looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so to put a group of people with like-mindedness, but from from a diverse perspective, to work together to put that.
Yep.
Whether it's a program, whether it's this or that. And then in a couple of weeks, I'm developing a workshop that it can be tailored to kind of any group, but it'll be tailored to our Kundalini community, where there's this concept of above the line, below the line, that was introduced to me by a member of our yoga community, African-American brother that has been in the community for a while and kind of in and out. But he has expertise in addictions, and he's come up with this training around intersectionality and oppression or privilege. And so this workshop goes into the concept of below the line, above the line, below the line, and that the further you are above the line is where the privilege exists, and then to recognize those below the line. And so the idea is, okay, having that understanding, what can I do to bring myself to the line and bring those that are below to the line, so then we are in this place of equanimity. And so just to get people thinking about, oh yeah, okay, now just helping them understand where they are as it relates to above the line and below the line, and then what steps they can take to support those that are below the line. If you are with privilege and you recognize that privilege, how can you use it to support equanimity? So that's a workshop that I'll be doing in a couple of weeks, and it'll be the first time I'll be kind of doing this workshop. And if it kind of works out well, then it may be something that I might continue to workshop
How do people
and have the discussion, because it really is a discussion point to get people to start talking about these things and to give them the terminology and the language to use to help them analyze themselves and bring awareness to themselves and go, "Oop, that was above the line statement, my bad," or wow, that's below the line, let me adjust my behavior.
Yeah, that's so much of this process, isn't it? Is just, using that semantic, just learning, all of us learning, oops, that was a below the line statement. I'm sorry. And once we can get past that initial resistance to the process, the process is fine. And it's actually interesting and still uncomfortable some, but for mature adults, it's not that uncomfortable.
Exactly. And I think that there are some things too that, and then I go into this compassion place. And and people say, well, you probably shouldn't let like a white person off the hook, but like, you know, it doesn't always have to be this state of contraction for,
right.
you know, to go, as we learn, there should be this place where we are uncomfortable with, but we get to relax in that discomfort and learn together, you know, and have the discussion together, and then see how individually within ourselves we can improve and grow.
And have patience from all sides of it, because there's trauma from all directions here. You know, it's messy. It's like, and if I'm like a person, if I'm a white person that's like kind of like critiquing like my black brother or sister because I disagree with, you know, how they're going about this, it's like, that's not really my place. That's not my place. Like, I need to just look at how can I discover, you know, how I can improve and how I can be more compassionate and loving and joyful within my own self. And then how can I use that goodness to help my friends, and to my friends being not any one exclusive group of people, but just humans, and not only just humans, by the way, beings.
Right. You know, one of the coolest things that I realized, it was kind of last summer as I was like kind of going through the web of like diversity inclusion, and you start with, you know, so let's take an event, you know, that is being held and thousands of people are, you know, come to it, and you think, okay, I'm a person of color, I'm the only one, and I'm feeling, you know, I love the term, and I have members in this group that I'm in, we coined it some kind of way, right? So I'm feeling some kind of way. I don't have a definition for, I don't have the words to articulate what I'm feeling, so I'm just going to say I'm feeling some kind of way, which is uncomfortable, right? And then I started thinking, but I'm also then looking at a person that's not like lean, that's curvy, that's a little fat, and I use fat just not as any body shaming or anything such as that, but someone who isn't the vision of what we hold a female yogi as, right? Yeah. Coming to this event, and I see her discomfort, and she may feel excluded, and I see, you know, an LGBTQ plus person, and they may feel excluded. And my whole point is that in these environments, there are a lot of people that feel like they're the only one, and that it really becomes less about, you know, color and a person of color, but just like everybody dealing with their own uniqueness and their own perceived differences, and how do you bring those people in too, you know, so that everybody is feeling, you know, equal, feeling comfortable, and not even feeling left outside of the circle. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important. And I think this work, I'm excited, you know, to see, you know, to learn from you around this, and to hopefully also work with you.
Yeah.
And also, you know, because we're good at this kind of stuff. I'm not talking just you and me, but yogis, like, we know how to like get inside of the psyche and identify something, and then give it a name. Not to give it a name because of it's ultimately that substantive, but unless we can identify a pattern and, you know, call it out, you can't get rid of that pattern. So if you have, like, for instance, going back to the semantics you were using earlier, and above the line and below the line, and then we can even get more specific in that, and to kind of like train up, as a friend of mine said to me earlier today, we have to, what'd he say? He said, that's why it's cool to train up on how to break this type of behavior down and language it accurately.
Exactly.
And when we can train up, language it accurately, you can bring it out into the open. We can identify it in I say that type of thing sometimes. In fact, I've said that phrase before, and I didn't recognize, you know, how that may be hurtful to somebody else. And, and certainly I didn't intend to, but, you know, either way.
Exactly. And yeah, and I just, I'm just really excited about the potential, and especially for us as yogis, because there was a part of me that was really sad because I felt like with all that we know, we should have been ahead on this. We should have been ready to go, and we weren't.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what you were saying, is that just by doing the yoga doesn't make you ready to go, and be at the forefront of creating change and being a part of this, being the leaders in this. But there's still time. It's not, we're at the beginning of it.
Oh yeah.
And I think we're the group to do it. Those of us who are waking up now and are like, yes, let's go. Let's get into it. Let's language it. And then let's get it out into the world and help escort people through this time to the other side.
Well said. And it's like, this is not a distraction. You know what I mean? This is not a distraction from our yoginess. This is not at all. This is actually a way to leverage deeper into our into the biggest work that we're doing, and whatever that is, and we all have different ways of kind of like getting inside of that, and we all have our own unique missions and things that we're good at, and things, and as I say all the time, there's a lot more things I suck at than I'm good at. I just focus on the few things that I'm good at. But this is not a distraction. This is actually a way for me to experience greater compassion and greater love. And if that's not the heart of what my practice is all about, I think I've missed the point. And
exactly.
It's not some, visions way up above the crown of the head and all that, impressing people with that type of thing, or like going, it's all about love. And this is an opportunity that is helping me to love in an even deeper way, because it has specific context, and the specific context right now in this moment in time is Black Lives Matter. And whether we like that phrase or don't like that phrase, that's what's happening. That's the specific context. It's plain to see. It's simple. It's love. It's about upliftment, and it's not complicated. It's not that deep. It's extremely deep, but in the way that we're talking about it is simple. It ain't that deep, y'all.
Exactly. It ain't that deep, y'all. And just to add one more point to what you just said, as far as this not being a distraction from the yoga. And there's, my friend and I talk about this quite a bit, and it really is an opportunity for our applied demonstration of our yoga. And that's why it's not a distraction, because we're taking our practice and we're applying it to the circumstances that we're in. We're applying it to this time, this moment in time that is requiring us, from a planetary perspective, from an astrological perspective, to face this time, to apply the tools to really integrate what we've learned and to get us to the other side. Applied demonstration of our teachings is what we need right now.
Yeah, well said, sister.
Mm-hmm.
Well, beautiful. How do people get in touch with you?
So I am on my email address is Vedya, Vedya Amrita, Amrita at myglowinghouse.com. And I'm open to receive emails. My website is myglowinghouse.com. And I am a certified colon hydrotherapist, as well as a certified Ayurvedic counselor, and also a Kundalini yogi. And so all of that is kind of on my page, and so that's there.
Beautiful. We didn't even talk Ayurveda. Next one.
That's for another conversation, right?
All right. So we'll put your website in the show description, the podcast description, so people will be able to click that, and then they can go to your website and they can find you on social media there and everything.
Yeah.
We'll put all that in the podcast description so people can find you.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah. Beautiful. Oh, thanks so much. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. It's such an honor to vibe with you in this way and to create and to bring this consciousness to the airwaves and put it out there, and hopefully it will help bring perspective to people and continue to crack them open and investigate within themselves how to take this moment in time to the next level for them.
Yeah, and enjoy it, and get on board. All right, beautiful. Well, until the next time.
Till the next time, brother. Thank you so much. It's such an honor.
Likewise. Sat Nam.
Sat Nam.
Thanks so much for listening today, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thank you to Vedya Amrita for being part of the podcast, for sharing her heart, her wisdom, her experiences with us. Greatly appreciate it. Definitely check her out. Her website is myglowinghouse.com, or you can just, in the podcast description here, you can get a link to her website. Follow her on Facebook and Instagram, myglowinghouse.com, and check the podcast description for the links to stay in touch with Vedya Amrita. Thanks so much also to Simrit for providing the music for pretty much everything we do. Definitely, if you haven't already, check out Simrit, Simrit, wherever you get your music. I recommend her latest, let me recommend a couple things. Her latest studio release, When We Return. Her latest live release, Live in Los Angeles 2019, just recorded this past October. That's the number one thing I've been listening to for now months, Live in Los Angeles. And then her new single, Some May Say, which I'm going to play in full again. I did this last episode at the very end. I'm going to do it again today. And she's got very soon another single coming out. Lots of good Simrit music on the horizon, but so much is already there waiting for you. So get her on your Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you go, Simrit, and check out the new single. I'm going to play it in full now, then head over to where you get your music to download. This is Some May Say by Simrit.
1, 2.
Heard what they may say all my life. Some will they may say. Some will they may say. Some will they may say. Oh, some will they may say.